What does it mean to be a good person in a world where the concepts of right and wrong seem to adjust to the circumstances and interests of those who hold power? Kindness, so often exalted as the supreme virtue, can become a mask, an invisible prison that prevents us from accessing our authenticity. In a universe where truth is manipulated, where words are redesigned to serve hidden purposes, how do we navigate between the genuineness of being good and the expectations imposed by external forces? George Orwell, with his prophetic and sharp vision of human nature and society, offers us a lens to explore this paradox. His works, especially 1984, are not only political warnings but also deep investigations into the human spirit. He shows us how the concept of kindness can be distorted into a tool of oppression, a mechanism of control that nullifies critical thinking and suffocates the soul. But this paradox of kindness is not just a political issue, it is also spiritual. We are often confronted with choices that challenge our integrity, asking us to adopt superficial or agreeable stances while ignoring fundamental parts of ourselves. The challenge of being good, in the most authentic sense, is an invitation to introspection. Who are we when all masks fall? Kindness, thus perceived, is not blind conformity, but an act of courage that requires facing our shadow and embracing our complexity. In this video, we will explore Orwell's ideas on kindness, morality, and control, connecting them with spiritual and psychological reflections. We will uncover how we can be good, not according to the expectations of the world, but in a way that is true to who we really are. In his darkest reflections, George Orwell identified a deep danger. Kindness, when defined by society, can easily transform into conformity. Under the guise of virtue, we may find ourselves blindly obeying norms we did not choose, internalizing values that serve control rather than freedom. In 1984, Orwell presents Winston Smith, a man who tries to resist this dynamic, but whose search for truth and authenticity is brutally crushed by a system that demands total submission. Winston is, in many respects, a symbol of genuine kindness. He questions the status quo, seeks truth in a world where lying is the rule, and refuses to betray his own humanity, even when everything around him conspires against it. However, it is precisely this struggle that leads to his destruction. Orwell shows us that, in a society built on manipulation and control, true kindness can be seen as a threat. Winston is punished not for doing something wrong, but for daring to be authentic. This reflection deeply resonates with spirituality. Often, the desire to be good can become a moral burden, a weight that distances us from our inner freedom. When we try to meet external expectations, whether from society, religious traditions, or even ourselves, we can get lost in a cycle of guilt, anxiety, and repression. Kindness, then, ceases to be an authentic expression and transforms into a burden that prevents us from living fully. Orwell warns us that this form of conformist kindness is not only destructive to the individual but also to society as a whole. When we conform to imposed morality, we stop questioning the structures that define what is right or wrong. We lose the ability to think critically, to resist, and to connect with our essence. True kindness, as Orwell indirectly suggests, cannot be blind obedience. It requires the courage to question, to reflect, and, above all, to be true to what we feel is just, even if it goes against external expectations. It is a kindness that arises from authenticity, not fear or conformity. In 1984, George Orwell presents Newspeak, a language system designed to simplify and distort thought. By restricting vocabulary and redefining words, the regime controls not only what people say but what they are able to think. This manipulation of language is a powerful tool for shaping morality and, consequently, the idea of goodness. When words like freedom or justice lose their original meaning, what remains is a superficial and manipulated version of good. Under the influence of totalitarian regimes, kindness becomes synonymous with obedience. Being good no longer means acting according to universal or authentic values, but simply following the imposed rules. This type of kindness transforms the individual into a passive agent, unable to question or resist. In Orwell's world, being good is being submissive, and any deviation from this superficial morality is severely punished. This dynamic resonates with Carl Jung's psychology, especially his analysis of the shadow and the persona. The persona is the mask we wear to adapt to social expectations, while the shadow contains the repressed aspects of our psyche, our fears, desires, and truths we prefer to ignore. When kindness is reduced to a set of external norms, we create a morally correct persona that hides our true nature. This not only disconnects us from who we really are, but also strengthens the shadow, which grows in intensity as it is repressed. The connection between newspeak and the repression of the shadow is clear. When we accept external definitions of kindness without questioning them, we deny important parts of ourselves. This repression creates an internal division, where our emotions and instincts are suffocated, leading to a sense of emptiness or dissatisfaction. More dangerously, this repressed shadow can manifest in destructive ways, both for the individual and for society. Orwell and Jung, from different perspectives, warn us about the dangers of imposed kindness. True kindness cannot be defined by systems of control or by the simplification of language and thought. It must emerge from an authentic connection with our essence, where we recognize both our light and our shadows. Only then can we act with true integrity, free from the masks that prevent us from seeing the world and ourselves as we truly are. The ideal of being a good person, when devoid of introspection and authenticity, can easily transform into an escape. Often, being good means avoiding internal conflicts, projecting our insecurities and dark aspects onto others. This superficial kindness may seem virtuous at first, but as Carl Jung warns, it is fertile ground for repression and hypocrisy. The shadow, in Jungian terms, consists of all parts of ourselves that we prefer to ignore or deny. When we strive to be good without confronting our shadow, we end up creating an internal division. This kindness is not the result of genuine integration but of an attempt to escape the discomfort that comes with confronting who we really are. Ultimately, this can lead to acts of harsh judgment and even the dehumanization of others, as we project onto them everything we reject in ourselves. Orwell, in 1984, shows us how moral hypocrisy can be exploited on a collective scale. In the world controlled by the party, the most cruel acts, torture, surveillance, manipulation, are justified in the name of a greater good. This distorted morality is an extension of the human desire to appear good in the eyes of others, even if it means ignoring reality or perpetuating oppression. This dynamic reminds us that kindness, without introspection, can easily be used as a tool of control. This paradox is evident not only in totalitarian systems but also in our daily lives. How often do we avoid confronting our flaws or responsibilities, opting to act good even if it means ignoring the truth? Kindness that does not include the shadow is, ultimately, fragile. It does not withstand adversity because it is not based on self-knowledge but on a superficial image. True kindness, as Jung and Orwell suggest in different ways, requires courage. Courage to look inside, confront what we hide, and integrate these parts into our identity. It is not an easy process, but it is essential to act genuinely and transform our kindness into something that not only eases our conscience but also promotes real and lasting good. The tension between being good and being authentic is one of the deepest issues George Orwell explores in 1984. Winston Smith, the protagonist, struggles to maintain his authenticity in a system that demands total conformity. He knows that being good in the party's eyes means renouncing his humanity, accepting the lies that sustain the regime. For Winston, being authentic is an act of resistance, even if it puts him at risk. His search for authenticity transforms him into a symbol of the fight against dehumanization. This same tension echoes in spirituality. Many spiritual traditions invite us to look within, to integrate all parts of ourselves, and to live in alignment with our inner truth. Yet, society often presents us with an implicit choice: be good according to external norms or be authentic, even if it means challenging expectations and risking rejection. The question that arises is it possible to be truly good without sacrificing authenticity? The answer is not simple. Being authentic does not mean acting selfishly or ignoring the needs of others. On the contrary, genuine authenticity requires a deep commitment to truth, both internal and external. When we act authentically, we are more connected to our essence, which allows us to offer the world a kindness that is not superficial or forced, but real and transformative. Orwell shows us, through Winston, that this struggle is painful and often lonely, but it is also essential. Without authenticity, kindness loses its substance, becoming only a reflection of others' expectations. In spirituality, this journey is described as the integration of the shadow, the process of accepting and incorporating all aspects of who we are, even those we would rather avoid. When we manage to integrate our light and our darkness, we discover that true kindness is not something imposed but something that flows naturally from a full and balanced identity. Winston's struggle in 1984 is a powerful metaphor for the challenge we all face. In a world that frequently asks us to choose between pleasing others and being true to ourselves, true kindness can only emerge when we reject this false dilemma. Authentic kindness is not a renunciation of our individuality, but an expression of it in its deepest and most courageous form. The manipulation of collective consciousness is one of the most effective tools for shaping behaviors and beliefs. George Orwell in 1984 shows us how totalitarian systems can use this manipulation to redefine moral concepts, transforming kindness into a propaganda weapon. Under the party's control, what does it mean to be good? It means obeying, accepting lies as truth, and renouncing critical thought. This control is not exercised only by force, but through narratives that infiltrate the collective mind, making questioning almost impossible. In the contemporary world, social media plays a similar role, though less explicit. They shape what it means to be good through algorithms that amplify certain narratives and suppress others. Kindness is often presented as a superficial label based on external approval, likes, shares, and public approval. Being good in this context often means adhering to a predefined morality, avoiding controversies or opinions that challenge the consensus. This superficiality not only limits our ability to reflect but also feeds a cycle of judgment and alienation. Kindness, instead of being an expression of compassion or authenticity, becomes a social currency used to gain validation or punish those who diverge. This process echoes what Carl Jung called projection. Instead of confronting our own shadows, we project our insecurities onto others, reinforcing simplistic narratives about good and evil. To escape this manipulation, it is essential to cultivate critical thinking and a deep connection with our own consciousness. Spirituality offers valuable tools for this. When we question dominant narratives and turn inward, we discover that true kindness cannot be dictated by algorithms or ideologies. It emerges from a space of reflection and authenticity, where our actions are guided by empathy, not the need for approval. Orwell warns us that, without this introspection, we are vulnerable to systems that shape our morality from the outside in, turning us into mere reflections of a manipulated collective consciousness. True freedom, and with it, true kindness, can only be achieved when we reject these imposed narratives and seek our own truth. This requires courage, but it is the only path to escaping the trap of superficial kindness and finding a good that is genuine and transformative. The path to authentic kindness involves a profound process of inner transformation, which Carl Jung called individuation. This is the process of integrating all parts of our being, including those we often reject or repress, such as the aspects contained in our shadow. Jung believed that only by accepting and incorporating these forgotten or denied parts can we become whole and live authentically. True goodness, in this context, is not something that stems from an external imposition, but from internal integration. When we recognize and accept our flaws, fears, and contradictions, we find a point of balance that allows us to act genuinely and compassionately. This goodness is not a mask to please or an escape from conflicts, but a natural expression of who we are at our core. Orwell, from his more critical and socio-political perspective, also suggests that critical thinking is essential for this journey. In 1984, Winston is one of the few characters who dares to question the system, trying to find a truth that transcends the party's lies. Although his quest is tragic, it reflects the importance of freedom of thought as a prerequisite for true goodness. Without the ability to reflect, question, and challenge, we are condemned to repeat behavioral patterns that distance us from our authenticity. In practice, spirituality offers us concrete paths to cultivate this authentic goodness. Meditation helps us observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment, allowing us to recognize parts of ourselves that we often avoid. The practice of compassion, both for ourselves and for others, teaches us to act from a space of empathy and connection, rather than judgment or self-deception. Small acts of kindness, carried out with intention and sincerity, have the power to transform both our lives and those around us. This process is neither fast nor simple. It requires patience, courage, and a willingness to confront the complexity of who we are. But it is in this effort that we find true freedom, the freedom to be who we are fully, to act with integrity, and to cultivate a goodness that is not limited to external expectations but reflects the depth of our own being. The paradox of goodness lies in its very nature. Being good requires navigating between external expectations and internal authenticity. It is a delicate balance, for often what is considered morally correct by society may conflict with our deeper, individual values. This tension reveals a central issue. Is goodness a free choice or a set of imposed rules that we follow without questioning? George Orwell warns us about the dangers of accepting morality as something absolute and external. In 1984, the party defines what is good, and any deviation from that definition is treated as treason. This manipulation eliminates free will, turning goodness into a tool of control. True goodness, on the other hand, can only exist where there is freedom of choice. It is free will that allows us to decide not only what is right but also why we act in a certain way. In spirituality, this issue becomes even deeper. Free will is seen as a sacred gift, the ability to decide our own path amidst the uncertainties of life. However, with this freedom comes the responsibility to look inward and confront our motivations. Are we acting according to our most authentic values, or merely trying to avoid judgment and conflict? Carl Jung offers us a key to dealing with this paradox. He suggests that true goodness arises when we integrate all parts of ourselves, including those we resist recognizing. Genuine goodness, then, is not conformity to external norms, but an expression of who we really are, illuminated by our journey of self-knowledge. Spiritually, this means that the paradox of goodness is not something to be solved, but something to be lived. It is through this constant navigation between light and shadow, between external expectations and internal truth, that we discover what it means to be a good person in a world full of moral complexities. And it is precisely in this acceptance of the paradox that we find the freedom to act with authenticity and compassion. George Orwell left us a warning that resonates powerfully in the modern world: the need to question, reflect, and seek truth amidst narratives that often blind us. In 1984, we see how control of language, thought, and morality can transform individuals into mere instruments of a system. However, Orwell's warning is not just a lament, it is also a call to action. He invites us to resist conformism and cultivate critical thinking, which is the foundation for genuine and authentic goodness. This message echoes in the ideas of Carl Jung, who reminds us that true freedom begins with confronting our shadows. We cannot achieve authenticity without first looking inward, recognizing and integrating the parts of ourselves we prefer to avoid. This journey of self-knowledge, known as individuation, is essential for freeing ourselves from external expectations and living according to our deepest truth. Being a good person, ultimately, is not about conforming to a set of norms or pleasing everyone. It is an act of courage and complexity. It requires that we embrace our contradictions, resist simplistic narratives, and seek a balance between the needs of the external world and our internal authenticity. True goodness is both a challenge and a gift, an opportunity to grow and contribute to the world from a place of integrity. And now, I ask, how do you view the concept of goodness in your life? Do you feel your actions reflect a search for approval or an authentic expression of who you are? These are questions that deserve reflection because, as Orwell and Jung show us, the journey to being a good person begins with the willingness to confront the truth, both in the world and within ourselves. If this reflection resonated with you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel to explore more topics like this. Share in the comments your own experiences and thoughts on what it means to be a good person in a world full of paradoxes. Remember, true goodness is not a destination, but a continuous journey of courage, self-knowledge, and compassion.